Chapter 1: The Shattered Veil. The last scent of home I remembered was a lie. It was the fragrance of sun-warmed marble and blooming magnolias, a perfume my father had the servants spray inside the carriage before they sealed the doors. It was the scent of Lyanna, golden, prosperous, and built on a foundation of forgotten sins. 6 days later, the only smell was damp earth and a metallic tang, like old blood. My heart had hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone and silk. The carriage wheels had stopped. Outside, the mist pressed against the glass, thick and white as a shroud, erasing the world. We had arrived at the border. We had arrived at the shattered veil. "We can go no further, Princess," a guard's voice, muffled and trembling, seeped through the carriage wall. "The horses will not step into the mist." I knew they wouldn't. Animals were wiser than men. They could smell the wrongness there, the ancient sickness that bled from the thorn veil. My father, King Thorne, had known of it, too. He knew he was not sending his only daughter to a political marriage, he was leading a lamb to an altar of sacrifice. His last words to me had not been of love or comfort, but of duty. "Lyanna needs this peace, Lyanna. Be strong." His eyes, however, had held no conviction, only the hollow guilt of a man signing a death warrant. A shudder had racked my frame, and I pulled my fur-lined cloak tighter. It did nothing to ward off the chill that had little to do with the air and everything to do with the land itself. I felt its sorrow seeping through the carriage floor, a low thrum of unending pain. With a deep breath that did little to steady me, I pushed open the door. The guards flinched back as the mist curled inside, cold and grasping. I stepped out onto blackened soil, and the breath I was holding escaped in a shaky plume. The air there was thin, heavy with the scent of decay and something else, something faintly, sweetly floral, like roses left to rot on a grave. I glanced at my hand, at the smooth, pale skin of my knuckles. Then I felt it, a faint, sharp prickle. I looked closer. Pushing through the delicate skin just above my ring finger was the tiniest green shoot, tipped with a thorn no larger than a needlepoint. A gasp had escaped my lips. It was real. I knew then, with a horrifying certainty, that the legends were real. The curse began to take root in any who lingered in the borderlands. I was not just entering a cursed kingdom, I was walking into the curse itself. "The king of Alaris awaits you, princess," the guard said, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder, too afraid to look at the path ahead. "You must walk from here. Alone." He placed my dowry chest on the ground, a small, ridiculously optimistic trunk filled with silks and jewels for a life I would never lead. Then, without another word, the guard scrambled back to the carriage. The driver cracked his whip, and the carriage turned, its wheels churning mud as it fled back toward the deceptive sunlight of Lyanna. It left me utterly, terrifyingly alone. The silence that descended was absolute. It was a living thing, broken only by the faint, rhythmic whisper that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. I forced my feet to move, one step, then another, dragging the chest behind me. The mist parted before me and closed in behind, swallowing the path, ensuring there was no retreat. The landscape that revealed itself was a masterpiece of desolation. The ground was a tapestry of twisted, thorny vines, thick as a man's arm, coiled around the skeletons of ancient trees. The thorns weren't just on the plants, they jutted from the earth like broken teeth. A faint red mist breathed from fissures in the blackened soil, and the sky above was a bruise of perpetual twilight. The whispers grew louder, clearer. They were not the wind. They were voices, dozens of them, tangled and sorrowful, whispering fragments of memory. "Sun on my face, a child's laugh, hold me." The cursed souls of the Thorn King's people, trapped within the vines that were once their bodies. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound was inside my head. After what had felt like an eternity, a shape resolved in the mist ahead. A fortress. But it wasn't built of stone. It had been grown, a colossal, sepulchral monstrosity of interwoven thorns and black rock, reaching for the ash-gray sky like a skeletal hand. The Castle of Thorns. As I drew closer, I saw that the walls pulsed with a faint, ruddy light, like the slow, steady beat of a dying heart. The gate was a maw of spiked vines, closed tight. I stood before it, my hope shriveling, when the vines began to retract, slithering back into the walls with a wet, tearing sound. An invitation. Stepping across the threshold had been like stepping into a tomb. The air was cold and thick with the hum of sorrow. The great hall was a forest of stone pillars wrapped in thorns. Some of the vines bore roses, but their petals were the color of dried blood, and they never bloomed. Portraits lined the walls, their subjects' faces obscured by decay and creeping briars. As I passed one, a thorn from a nearby vine snaked out and gently brushed my cheek. I flinched away, and a single drop of crimson sap, thick as blood, welled from its tip and fell to the floor. My footsteps echoed on the stone as I walked toward the only source of light, a cavernous throne room at the far end of the hall. The entrance was flanked by two massive rose bushes, their branches twisting into the shape of skeletal guards. The throne room was a circle of sorrow. The throne itself, carved from weirwood and ravendark stone, was empty. It was surrounded by a garden of the same withered roses, their roots tangled with human bones. The air was so heavy with grief I could barely breathe. "You are late." The voice came from the shadows beside the throne. It was not a monster's roar but something far more chilling, a deep, resonant baritone, like the grinding of ancient stones and the rustle of autumn leaves. It held the weight of centuries of pain. A figure detached itself from the darkness. He was impossibly tall, his form a silhouette of a king, but he was not entirely a man. He was a living effigy of his cursed land. Shadows clung to him like a cloak, but I could see thorns coiling around his arms, woven into the very fabric of his dark tunic. Briars curled up his neck, framing a jawline that was all sharp, aristocratic angles. His face remained in shadow, but I saw the glint of his eyes, not human, but glowing with a soft, pained, amber light. He moved toward me, not walking, but gliding, the thorns on the floor parting before him. He stopped a mere arm's length away. I could feel a cold aura radiating from him, the chill of a grave. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. "Princess Lyanna of Valinor," he said, his voice a low thrum that vibrated in my chest. "Another lamb sent to the slaughter. Do you know what happened to the queens who came before you?" I shook my head, unable to find my voice. "They withered before the dawn," he whispered, the sound both cruel and sorrowful. "Their screams were a symphony for my thorns. Their blood, a poor substitute for what was stolen." He raised a hand, and I saw that his fingers were long and pale, but tipped with ravendark, sharp thorns instead of nails. He reached toward my face, and I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the end. I had been so sure I would die just like the others. But his touch never came. "Your fear, it smells of magnolias and lies," he murmured, his hand dropping. "It is the scent of your bloodline." He turned, the shadows swirling around him, and glided back toward his throne. He didn't sit, but stood beside it, a king in his own mausoleum. "I tire of this cycle," he said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "I tire of the taste of hollow vengeance." He turned his head, and his amber eyes fixed on me, pinning me in place. "So I will offer you a choice your predecessors never had. A bargain." My breath had caught. "A bargain?" "My curse has a heart, a source. It is an artifact your people stole from this land centuries ago. Find it. Bring it back to me. Break the curse that binds me to this living death," he commanded. "Do this, and I will spare your life. I will release your kingdom from the threat of my wrath and let the memory of Valinor's treachery fade. Hope, fragile and treacherous, had fluttered in my chest. A chance. He was offering me a chance to live, to save my people. And if I fail? I whispered, the words barely audible. The Thorn King turned fully toward me then, and for the first time, a sliver of candlelight illuminated his face. It was a face of tragic, ravaged beauty, high cheekbones, a strong mouth twisted in a permanent grimace of pain. A scar, like a lightning strike, ran from his temple to his jaw, and from it, a single, perfect crimson rose bloomed against his pale skin. If you fail, he said, his amber eyes holding no mercy, only an abyss of ancient sorrow, your blood will feed my thorns. And your screams will be the sweetest of all. He gestured to a hulking, silent figure in the corner, one of the half-cursed retainers masked in wood and vine. Show the princess to her chambers. She has until dawn to consider my offer. The servant led me through pulsing, whispering corridors to a room that must have once been beautiful. A large bed with rotting silk sheets, a vanity with a cracked mirror, and a balcony overlooking the blighted kingdom. I was left alone, the heavy door booming shut behind me. I did not need until dawn. My choice was already made. I would accept. I would find this artifact and break his curse. I had to survive. Exhaustion finally claimed me, and I collapsed onto the dusty bed, falling into a fitful sleep. I dreamt of whispers and grasping vines. I was startled awake by the first, faint rays of dawn filtering through the grimy windows. The pale light illuminated the room, and I remembered with a jolt of terror that this was the hour the other queens had died. My heart seized. The whispers from the walls were louder now, urgent. I sat up, my eyes darting around the room, expecting the Thorn King, expecting death. But the room was empty. Then I heard it. A soft, scraping sound. I looked down. The thorns woven into the wooden posts of the bed were moving. They had slithered down the posts like serpents, their sharp tips leaving scratches in the wood. They crept across the floor, converging on the bed, on me. A cold dread, sharper than any thorn, pierced my heart. The bargain had been a lie. He had meant for me to die all along. One vine, thicker than the rest, reached my ankle. It wrapped around my leg, its grip surprisingly strong, cold as the grave. Its thorn, wickedly sharp, pressed against my skin, drawing a single bead of blood. And as it did, a voice, clearer than all the others, whispered directly into my mind. It was the voice of a woman, filled with terror and regret. And the name it whispered was my own. Lyanna. Chapter 2, The Hall of Weeping Glass. The thorn pressed into my flesh, a single point of ice in the spreading fire of my terror. The woman's voice, a ghost in my own mind, whispered my name again, laced with a sorrow so profound it felt like a physical weight. I waited for the killing stroke, for the vine to tighten and snap my bone, for the hundreds of other thorns to surge forward and tear me apart. My life, I thought, would end here, a forgotten princess bleeding out on a dusty bed in a kingdom of ghosts. But the final, tearing pain never came. Instead, the pressure on my ankle eased. The thorn retracted, leaving behind a single, perfect drop of my own blood, which the vine seemed to absorb. It glowed with a faint crimson light for a moment before fading. Slowly, hesitantly, the sea of thorns slithered back, retreating to the bedposts and walls, becoming still once more. I was left trembling and gasping for breath, the phantom sensation of the vine still cold against my skin. The heavy door to the chamber creaked open. The Thorn King stood there, a silhouette against the dim light of the corridor. He had not come to watch me die, but to see what the castle had decided. It seems the thorns have tasted your blood and found it wanting, he said, gliding into the room. His amber eyes glowed in the gloom, fixed on the single drop of blood I'd left on the rotting sheets. They did not kill you. You lied, I accused, my voice a ragged whisper. You knew this would happen. I lied about nothing, he countered, his tone devoid of heat. The bargain was real. But this castle is more than my prison, it is the tomb of my people. The thorns are their memories, their pain. They have a will of their own. They test every queen of your bloodline who enters this room. Your predecessors screamed. They fought. Their terror was a familiar feast for the roots. He paused, his gaze lifting to meet mine. You did not scream. Why? I thought of the cold finality in my father's eyes, of the whisper in my mind that sounded more of regret than malice. There was no one to hear me, I said, the truth of it landing with a hollow thud in my own heart. A flicker of something, was it surprise? Pity, crossed his ravaged face before it was gone. The castle has rendered its judgment. You are permitted to live, for now. Your acceptance of the bargain holds. You may begin your search. He turned to leave. Wait, I called out, scrambling from the bed. Where do I start? This place is a labyrinth. The artifact, what is it? What does it look like? He paused at the door, his back to me. It was called the Heart of the Veil. A relic of the old gods of life, a thing of living wood and captured starlight. It holds the lifeblood of this land. As for where to look, he finally turned his head, his amber eyes seeming to look straight through me. This castle is a prison of memory. The walls hold whispers, but the mirrors hold the truth. Seek the hall where the glass weeps with what it has seen. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with the silent thorns and his cryptic clue. After splashing my face with brackish water from a basin, I forced myself to move. My quest had begun. The castle was a maze of decaying grandeur. I wandered through silent ballrooms where dust motes danced in faint shafts of light, through libraries where books had crumbled into mulch on the shelves. The whispers were my constant companions, rising and falling with my steps, ghosts of conversations from a happier time. It took hours, but I finally found it. Tucked away in a forgotten wing of the castle was a long, narrow corridor with no windows. The walls were lined with towering mirrors, their silver frames tarnished and wrapped in weeping vines that dripped a clear, sap-like substance onto the floor, as if the glass itself were crying. The Hall of Weeping Glass. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. The air was frigid, and the silence here was different, heavy, expectant. I approached the first mirror, bracing myself to see my own frightened face. But my reflection was not there. Instead, the glass swirled with milky light, and an image resolved within its depths. I saw a forest, but not the blighted, thorny wasteland I had walked through. This forest was alive, vibrant with a green so deep it hurt my eyes. Sunlight streamed through a canopy of ancient trees, and the air was filled with the sound of birdsong. In the distance, the castle of Thorne stood, not as a sepulchral monstrosity, but as a proud and beautiful fortress of grey stone, draped in flowering roses. I stumbled from one mirror to the next, my breath catching in my throat. Each mirror was a window into the past, a fragment of a lost world. I saw people walking the castle halls, men and women with laughter in their eyes and flowers in their hair. They were not cursed ghosts but a living, breathing people. Then I saw him. In a mirror depicting a sun-drenched courtyard, a man was sparring with a guard. He was young, perhaps my own age, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and a laugh that was free and full of warmth. He moved with the easy grace of a born warrior, but there was no cruelty in him. It was Thorne. The same sharp jawline, the same aristocratic brow, but his face was unmarred by scars or sorrow. His eyes were not a pained amber, but a clear, bright hazel, alight with life. A prince, blessed by his gods and loved by his people. My heart ached for the man he had been. As I moved to the final mirror at the end of the hall, my stomach twisted in knots. This one was larger than the others, its frame a twisted mass of petrified roses. As the image inside coalesced, I saw the prince again. He was standing in a moonlit garden, the very one whose bones I had seen in the throne room. But he was not alone. Standing before him was a woman. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes that held the deep blue of a summer sky. She wore a gown of Valiner's silk, and on her head was a simple coronet that I recognized from the royal portraits in my own castle. A terrible, chilling familiarity washed over me. I saw my father's jawline in hers, my own nose, the same shape of her eyes when she smiled. She was Queen Lyanna I. My great-grandmother. And she was holding Prince Thorne's hand, her head tilted up toward him as he spoke. They were not political rivals, they were not strangers. The look on Thorne's face was one of pure, unguarded adoration. He leaned in and whispered something that made her laugh, a sound like wind chimes. My ancestor, the founder of my prosperous kingdom, had been in love with the mortal prince who would become the monster. The image in the mirror shifted, the scene changing. It was darker now, inside some kind of sanctum. Lyanna stood alone before a pedestal of living weirwood. And resting upon it was a glowing object. The heart of the veil. It was smaller than I had imagined, a fist-sized carving of wood that seemed to contain a swirling galaxy of light within it. It pulsed with a soft, warm glow, and I could almost feel the life radiating from it through the glass. Lyanna reached for it, her hand trembling. For a moment, she hesitated. Her face was a mask of conflict, love warring with a desperate ambition I recognized all too well. It was the same look I had seen in my father's eyes. Then, her expression hardened. Her fingers closed around the heart. The moment she lifted it from its pedestal, the light inside it flickered violently. The image in the mirror shuddered, and I was suddenly back in the moonlit garden. Thorne was there, but he had fallen to his knees. He threw his head back and a scream was torn from his throat, a sound of pure, soul-shattering agony. It was not a scream of rage, but of betrayal and unbearable pain. As he screamed, I watched in horror as the scar I had seen on his face tore itself into existence, a line of black decay splitting his perfect skin. And from that wound, the first blood-red rose burst forth, its thorns digging into his flesh. The beautiful garden around him began to wither, the roses turning black and crumbling to ash in seconds. I pressed my hands against the cold glass, my own scream caught in my throat. The curse had not been laid upon him by some enemy sorcerer. It had been born from him. It was the physical manifestation of his heartbreak, fueled by the stolen magic of his land. The scene in the mirror began to fade, but before it went black, one final image burned itself into my mind. I saw my own reflection, pale and horrified, appearing on the surface of the glass. But it was not perfect. It was superimposed over the fading image of Queen Lyanna, her face now cold and triumphant as she clutched the heart of the veil. For a terrifying second, her face and mine were one. I stumbled back from the mirror, a strangled sob escaping my lips. The truth was a poison, seeping into my very soul. My family had not just been rivals with the Thorn Veil. We were the authors of its damnation. My prosperity was built on his pain. My life was a product of his death. And as that realization crashed down upon me, the whispers in the hall, which had been a constant, sorrowful murmur, rose in volume. They swirled around me, no longer fragmented memories, but a unified chorus of spectral voices. And the single, damning word they chanted was meant only for me. Betrayer. 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 Chapter 3, The Price of a Stolen Heart. I fled the hall of weeping glass, but there was no escape. The word betrayer followed me, echoing not in the corridor but in the chambers of my own skull. It wrapped around my heart, squeezing with the cold finality of a serpent. I stumbled through the pulsing passageways of the castle, my hands pressed to my ears as if I could block out the truth. Every story I had ever been told, every ounce of pride I had in my name, had been a lie. Valina's golden age was a gilded theft. My ancestor, Queen Alara, was not a pioneering diplomat who secured her people's future. She was a thief who had damned a kingdom for the sake of her own, breaking the heart of a man who had loved her. The thought was so vile, so fundamentally shattering, that I had to lean against a thorn-wrapped pillar, gasping for air that tasted of ash and sorrow. The whispers of the castle had changed. They were no longer the fragmented memories of strangers. They now felt personal, accusatory. Every rustle of a vine, every mournful sigh of wind through a broken window, felt like a judgment against my blood. My guilt was a physical thing, a sickness in my gut. I was the descendant of the monster, not him. In that moment of crushing self-revulsion, my fear of the Thorn King vanished, replaced by a desperate, aching need for. I did not know what. Absolution. Understanding. I only knew I could not bear this knowledge alone. I had to face him. I had to see the victim of my family's crime. I did not know where to find him, so I simply walked, letting the castle's sorrowful hum guide me. I climbed winding staircases that seemed carved from bone, my steps echoing in the oppressive silence. The path led me to a high balcony, a windswept perch of black stone that overlooked the blighted expanse of the Thorn Vale. He was there. Thorne stood at the edge, his back to me, his dark cloak whipping in the cold wind. He was utterly still, a statue of grief surveying his dead kingdom. The perpetual twilight cast his silhouette in shades of gray and deep purple. Even from a distance, I could feel the waves of pain radiating from him, a cold so profound it seemed to draw the very warmth from the air. "You saw," he said, without turning. His voice was not a question, but a flat statement. The wind carried the sound away almost as soon as he spoke it. "All of it," I managed to say, my voice trembling as I walked toward him. I stopped a few feet behind him, not daring to get closer. "I saw the veil as it was. I saw you, before." The words felt inadequate, hollow. "And I saw her. Queen Alara." At the sound of her name, every thorn on his body seemed to stiffen. The rose blooming from the scar on his face pulsed, its crimson deepening to the color of a fresh wound. He turned slowly, and the agony in his amber eyes was a physical blow. It was the same pain I had seen in the mirror, an anguish that centuries had not managed to dull. "Do not," he rasped, his voice a low, dangerous growl, "speak her name in this place." "She was my great-grandmother," I choked out, tears finally blurring my vision. "The stories we were told, they said your kingdom fell to pride, that the gods cursed you. They never said we were the cause." A bitter, broken sound that might have been a laugh escaped his lips. "Of course not. History is a fable written by the victors. Why would the Golden Queen of Valina admit she built her throne upon a foundation of rot and ruin? Why tell her people their prosperity was purchased with a poisoned heart?" He took a step toward me, and I held my ground, though every instinct screamed to retreat. "You asked me where to start your quest. Now you know. The heart of the veil is not just an artifact. It is the very life of this land, and it has been sustaining your kingdom for 300 years. His words confirmed my deepest fear. Valina's unnaturally long seasons of growth, its immunity to the blights that plagued other lands, it was all fueled by stolen life. "Why offer me a bargain at all?" I asked, my voice thick with shame. "Why not just kill me like the others? Why give me a chance to break a curse that my own bloodline forged?" "Because every queen your father sent before you was a carbon copy of her," he snarled, the name hanging unspoken between us. Proud. Defiant. Blind to the truth. They saw only a monster in a cage. They died screaming their innocence, and the thorns feasted on their lies. He looked at me then, a long, searching gaze that seemed to peel back my skin and peer directly into my soul. "But you were different. The thorns tasted your blood and paused. And you came to me not with accusations, but with questions. He turned back to the blighted Vishta, a king reigning over a graveyard. "I wanted to see," he whispered, the sound almost lost to the wind. "After 3 centuries of hate, I wanted to see if a single drop of her blood could hold an ounce of honor. I wanted to know if one of her descendants was capable of seeing the truth." The weight of his test, of his centuries-long vigil, pressed down on me. I had seen the truth, and it was worse than any nightmare. "Then the bargain stands," I said, a new resolve hardening my voice. "I will go back. I will find the heart and I will bring it back to you. I will atone for what she did." For a long moment, Thorne was silent. The wind howled around the parapet, a mournful, lonely sound. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow, devoid of all hope. "It is not that simple, Princess." "What do you mean?" I demanded. "I know where it is. It must be in the royal vaults beneath my home. I can retrieve it." "Retrieve it?" He turned on me, his face a mask of bitter irony. "And do what?" "Place it back on a pedestal." The heart was not a jewel, Lyanna. It was the anchor for the life force of this kingdom. When she tore it away, she did not just steal an object, she ripped the soul out of this land. A wound that deep does not heal so easily. A cold dread began to creep up my spine, colder than the wind, colder than his presence. "Then what is the remedy? What does it take to break the curse?" He looked down at his hands, at the raven-dark, sharp thorns that grew from his fingertips. "For 300 years, the heart has been in Valinor, its stolen magic bleeding into your soil, granting you prosperity. It has woven the fates of our 2 kingdoms together. Your light is sustained by our darkness. A simple return would do nothing. The magic is imbalanced. The debt is too vast." He finally lifted his head, and the raw, undiluted agony in his amber eyes was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "The land does not need the old heart. It has been away too long. The wound is festering. The land requires a new one. A new heart." I whispered, not understanding. The world tilted on its axis. The wind, the whispers, the pulsing castle, it all faded into a deafening roar in my ears. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place, forming a picture of such exquisite cruelty that it stole the breath from my lungs. The test. The bargain. The other queens who had died. They had all failed the test, their selfish fear proving them unworthy of the true price. I was not sent here to find the cure. He had been waiting to see if I was worthy enough to become it. My gaze fell from his haunted eyes to the twisting thorns that covered his body, to the blighted land that stretched to the horizon, and I finally understood. The bargain was never a quest. It was a sentence. And the price for my kingdom's salvation wasn't an artifact. It was me. Chapter 4: A Prison of 2 Hearts. I stood on that windswept balcony and felt the truth of my fate settle into my bones, not with a crash, but with a strange and terrifying calm. The roaring in my ears subsided, replaced by the mournful howl of the wind. My life was forfeit. It had been the moment I was born a princess of Valinor, a link in a chain of guilt that stretched back 300 years. My father had not sent me here to be a queen. He had sent me here to be an atonement. A laugh, thin and brittle, escaped my lips. Thorne flinched at the sound, his amber eyes narrowing with confusion. He had expected tears, pleas, a futile attempt to flee. He had not expected this chilling clarity. "All this time," I said, my voice steady despite the hollowness in my chest, "my kingdom has prospered. We grew fat on your famine, we basked in a light stolen from your sky. A life for a kingdom. It seems a fair trade, does it not?" "Do not speak of fairness," he growled, the thorns on his arms seeming to writhe. "There has been no fairness in this since the day she chose a crown over a soul." I ignored his fury, my mind now fixed on the horrifying logistics of my own demise. Tell me, I said, turning to face him fully, my gaze unflinching. What does it mean? To become the heart. Is it a quick death? Or something else? He recoiled as if I had struck him. A deep, shuddering breath racked his frame. You should not ask. I am not a lamb to be led blindly to the altar, I insisted, taking a step closer. The wind whipped a strand of my hair across my face, and I pushed it back, my hand steady. I am the price. I have a right to know what is being paid. Tell me. For a long moment, he simply stared, the ancient pain in his eyes warring with a new, unsettling emotion. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and heavy, like a eulogy for the living. It is not death, princess. It is a binding. You would be taken to the sanctum, the place where the old heart was kept. There, you must willingly offer yourself to the land, an apology written in blood and bone. His gaze drifted past me, to the blighted kingdom below. The thorns would take you. They would root you to the soil, and your body would become their anchor. Your blood would flow into the blackened earth, cleansing it. Your flesh would nourish it. And your soul, he paused, his jaw clenching. Your consciousness would dissolve, your memories scattered to become the whispers of the wind, your dreams the fleeting scent of a rose that might one day bloom again. You would become the song of the land, but you would no longer be you. It was a fate so much worse than a simple death. An eternity as a mindless, feeling prisoner, my very being fueling the life of a kingdom I would never see. I should have been horrified. I should have collapsed. But I only felt the last vestiges of my old life falling away, leaving behind a core of grim purpose. My quiet acceptance seemed to disarm him more than any outburst could have. The anger in his posture bled away, leaving him looking weary, ancient, and unbearably lonely. He turned from me and walked back toward the doorway, his movements stiff. Come, he said, his voice softer now. There is something you should see. I followed him without question, away from the windswept balcony and deeper into the castle's heart. He led me not to the dungeons or the throne room, but to a part of the castle that seemed less burdened by the curse. The thorns on the walls here were thinner, and a faint, silvery light pulsed from the stone itself. He stopped before a circular door of polished weirwood, untouched by decay. He pressed his palm against it, and the door swung inward without a sound, revealing a room that took my breath away. It was a grand, two-story orrery. A vast, mechanical model of the heavens filled the space, its brass and silver arms holding planets of polished crystal. In the center, a sphere of captured light pulsed with a soft, white glow, a miniature sun that cast dancing constellations across the high, domed ceiling. Here, the whispers were silent. The air was still and clean, holding only the faint scent of metal and dust. It was a pocket of forgotten magic, a memory of a time when the world was filled with wonder instead of pain. My father built this, Thorne said quietly, his gaze on the intricate model. He believed the fate of our kingdom was written in the stars. A foolish notion. Is it? I asked, walking toward the central light. He was right about its fall. He did not foresee it being stolen by a pretty face and a hollow heart, Thorne countered, bitterness creeping back into his voice. He ran a hand over a silver sphere representing a moon. I used to spend my nights here. I dreamed of sailing ships, not across the sea, but between those stars. I wanted to be an explorer. In this room, surrounded by the ghosts of his lost dreams, he seemed less a monster and more a man. The thorns that coiled around his arms seemed less like a part of him and more like a cage he was trapped within. My hand, of its own accord, lifted to my chest, to the small, embroidered sigil of Lyanna on my gown. I felt an overwhelming urge to rip it from the fabric. This is not your fault, Lyanna, he said, his voice startlingly gentle. He had seen the gesture. It is my name. My blood, I whispered. You did not make the choice. He stepped closer, his amber eyes searching my face in the soft starlight of the orrery. You are not her. As he stood before me, I noticed the small thorn that had sprouted on my hand in the borderlands had grown, a tiny, sharp barb of green against my pale skin. Before I could think, Thorne reached out and gently took my hand in his. I braced myself for the cold, for the sharp points of his own thorny fingers. But as his skin touched mine, a strange warmth spread through my hand. I looked down, my breath catching. Where his fingers covered the tiny thorn on my knuckle, it was receding, dissolving back into my skin, leaving it smooth and unmarred. The connection between us, the magic of my blood and his curse, had created a moment of impossible healing. I looked up at him, my heart hammering in my chest. He was staring at our joined hands with a look of stunned disbelief. His grip tightened, not with menace, but with a kind of desperate wonder. In his eyes, for the first time, I did not see a cursed king or a vengeful monster. I saw Thorne, the man who dreamed of stars. And in that moment, in that secret, silent room, the chasm of 300 years of hatred between our bloodlines vanished, leaving only a man and a woman, bound by a terrible, shared fate. The warmth of his touch was a spark in the end. I burst into the throne room, the chamber of bones and withered roses. I did not hesitate. I walked directly to the empty dais where the raven-dark throne stood, the place where the heart of the Vale had once rested, the place that was to be my tomb and my salvation. I turned to face the empty hall, a queen claiming her true and final throne. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and prepared to offer myself to the waiting thorns. I, Lyanna of Valinor, I began, my voice ringing with sacrificial certainty, do willingly offer. No. Thorne's roar echoed through the chamber, filled with a raw panic that shattered the sepulchral silence. He was there, at the entrance to the throne room, his chest heaving, his face a mask of desperation. He crossed the room in seconds, a storm of shadow and fury. He grabbed my arm, his grip hard, pulling me away from the dais. His touch was no longer warm, it was searing, frantic. I will not let you do this, he said, his voice a ragged, broken thing. He was shaking his head, his amber eyes wild with a conflict I did not understand. You must. I cried, struggling against his grip. It is the only way. It is the price for what my family did, for what I am. I do not care, he shouted, his pain raw and exposed. I have waited 300 years for this. I have dreamed of the moment a queen of Valinor would finally pay the price. He looked at me, his expression crumbling, the carefully constructed walls of his hatred turning to dust. But now, seeing you stand there, so willing to sacrifice everything for a crime that is not your own, I find I cannot watch you burn to save myself. He held me fast, a cursed king and his willing sacrifice, locked in a new and impossible struggle. I would rather live in this agony for another 1,000 years, he whispered, his voice cracking with the weight of his confession, than become the monster who leads you to your grave. Chapter 5, The Sunken Grotto. We stood locked in that impossible stalemate, a living paradox in the heart of the dying castle. I, the intended sacrifice, fought for my right to die, while he, the beneficiary of that sacrifice, fought to save my life. The sheer irony was a madness that threatened to consume us both. You cannot stop me, I insisted, twisting in his grip. This is my choice. My duty. It is a choice I will not accept, he thundered, and the entire throne room seemed to shudder with his rage. The withered roses trembled, shedding petals of dried blood. I have spent 3 centuries drowning in the poison of one Valinor queen's choice. I will not be saved by the poison of another's. This is not poison, it is the cure. I argued, my voice rising to match his. You said it yourself, a life for a kingdom. Your people are trapped, whispering in these vines. My people are living on borrowed time. Without this, both our kingdoms will eventually fall to ruin. Then let them fall, he roared, his face a mask of torment. The thorns on his arms grew longer, sharper, scraping against the stone of my skin, yet drawing no blood. Let this entire continent return to dust. I will not have your death on my conscience. I will not become her, building a life on a tomb. The mention of Lyanna, of my ancestor, struck the heart of his refusal. He was not just trying to save me, he was trying to save himself from becoming the monster she had been, a user of lives for personal gain. His curse was a prison of thorns, but his soul was a prison of memory, and he refused to let me become another one of its ghosts. As our wills clashed, the castle itself seemed to recoil in agony. The faint, ruddy pulsing in the walls grew more frantic, the light turning a violent, angry red. The whispers escalated into a cacophony of shrieking voices, a storm of confusion and pain. The curse was a sentient, hungry thing, and we were denying it the meal it had been promised. A thick vine snaked down from the ceiling, its thorn tip hovering just above my head, a clear and impatient threat. Seeing it, Thorne pulled me away, shielding me with his own body. There must be another way, he said, his voice ragged with desperation. We both know there isn't, I sobbed, the fight finally draining from me, leaving only the hollow ache of despair. No, he said, his eyes scanning the agitated throne room. An idea, faint and desperate, seemed to spark in the depths of his amber eyes. Perhaps we have been asking the wrong question. We have only asked how to pay the debt. We never asked if the debt could be erased. I stared at him. What do you mean? This curse was born of magic, he reasoned, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. An act of profound betrayal that twisted the life force of the veil into what you see now. If magic forged this prison, then perhaps older, purer magic can unmake it. He looked at me, his expression intense. The heart of the veil was a relic of the old gods. Its magic was of creation and life. The curse is its opposite, a magic of decay and sorrow. To fight it, we would need knowledge of that original magic. A flicker of hope, so fragile I was afraid to breathe, ignited within me. And where would we find such knowledge? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze turning inward, searching through centuries of memory. Before the kings, this land was tended by priestesses. The first queen of the Thorn Vale was one such woman, Alithia. Her power was not in ruling, but in communing with the land itself. The legends say she built a sanctum, a place where the veil between the world of men and the world of gods was thin. It was there she learned the songs of creation. Where is it? I pressed, my heart beginning to race. His expression darkened. It has been lost for centuries. After the curse, the castle sank, the lower levels flooding with the sluggish, poisoned waters of the rivers. The sanctum, if it still exists, is deep beneath us. In a place we now call the Sunken Grotto. A new path. A dangerous, uncertain quest, but a path nonetheless. It was a chance, however slim, that did not end with my dissolution into the soil. Then that is where we must go, I declared. Thorne searched my face, seeing the new resolve there. The hard lines of his own face softened with a reluctant admiration. It will be dangerous. The curse is strongest in the depths. The whispers there can drive a person mad. And the thorns, they are ancient and sentient. I have faced down your curse, your castle, and you, I replied, a small smile touching my lips for the first time. I think I can face a little water. For the first time since I had met him, a genuine smile graced his own lips. It was a breathtaking sight, like seeing the sun rise after a long and bitter winter. It transformed his ravaged face, showing me another glimpse of the laughing prince from the mirror. Come then, he said, his voice losing its harsh edge. The entrance is near the old gardens. He led me from the throne room, away from the shrieking whispers and the agitated thorns. As we walked, a strange quiet fell over the castle, as if it were holding its breath, waiting to see what we would do. We passed through the dead garden, its skeletal trees and bone-strewn earth a grim reminder of what we fought against. At the far end, hidden behind a statue of a weeping goddess, was a spiral staircase of black stone, descending into utter darkness. A cold, damp air, thick with the smell of mold and stagnant water, rose to meet us. Thorne paused at the top of the stairs, turning to me. The faint light from the courtyard illuminated the conflict on his face. "Lyanna," he said, his voice low and serious. "I brought you here to be my kingdom's salvation. A tool to end my suffering." He shook his head, a look of profound self-loathing in his eyes. "But I find I would rather see this kingdom fall into dust than lose you to it." The raw honesty of his confession stole the air from my lungs. 300 years of pain and hatred, and it had all come down to this. To him choosing me over his own release. My heart ached with a feeling so powerful, so new, it was almost painful. It was the treacherous, beautiful blooming of love in the most barren of soils. "Then we will find another way," I whispered. "Together." He held out his hand to me. It was not a command, but an offering. A promise of partnership. I placed my hand in his, expecting the familiar cold. But a jolt of warmth, fierce and bright, shot up my arm. I looked down in astonishment. As our skin touched, the ever-present thorns that coiled around his arm seemed to shrink, their wicked points dulling, receding slightly into his skin. At the same time, the small, persistent thorn on my own knuckle, which had begun to regrow after our encounter in the orrery, vanished completely, leaving my skin smooth. Our touch, our unity, had a tangible effect on the curse. We were not just fighting it, our very connection was a weapon against it. A gasp escaped Thorne's lips as he stared at his own arm, then at me, his eyes wide with a wonder that mirrored my own. In that moment, we were not a cursed king and a fated sacrifice. We were a flicker of impossible hope against an ancient darkness. He tightened his grip on my hand, his strength a comforting anchor in the terrifying unknown. Together, we turned and took the first step down into the suffocating blackness of the passage, our joined hands a single, small point of light against the oppressive, waiting dark. Chapter 6: The Song of Creation. The darkness that swallowed us at the top of the stairs was absolute. It was a physical presence, a heavy, suffocating blanket that muted all sound and stole all warmth. The air grew thick, choked with the smell of wet stone and something ancient and loamy, like a grave disturbed after centuries. Thorne's hand in mine was the only real thing in the universe, a point of heat and strength that I clung to with a desperate intensity. As we descended, the whispers began. They were different from the sorrowful murmurs in the castle above. Down here, in the foundation of the curse, they were insidious and sharp, loaded with temptation. They slithered into my mind, no longer collective ghosts but individual, seductive voices. "She sent you to die," a voice like my mother's whispered in my ear. "He is a monster. His curse will taint you. Flee. Go home. She looks at you and sees the woman who destroyed you," another voice, like Thorne's father from the mirror, hissed in his mind. I knew because I felt him flinch, his grip tightening on my hand. "Her blood is poison. Let her go. Let her pay the price." The whispers sought to pry us apart, to feast on our deepest fears and insecurities. We walked on, our joined hands a defiant shield against the psychological onslaught. The effect our touch had on the curse seemed to work on the whispers as well. As long as we held on, they remained echoes at the edge of our minds, unable to gain purchase. After a descent that felt like an eternity, the oppressive darkness began to give way to a faint, spectral luminescence. We emerged from the narrow staircase into a cavern of breathtaking, tragic beauty. The sunken grotto. It was a vast, subterranean space, the original lower levels of the castle now submerged in black, still water. The only light came from veins of glowing, silver moss that pulsed on the cavern walls and from strange, bioluminescent fungi that grew in clusters on the crumbling ruins of archways and pillars rising from the water. The light cast ethereal, dancing reflections on the surface, making it seem as if a sky full of captive stars was trapped beneath the water. The air hummed with a dormant, potent magic, and the whispers here were hushed, reverent, as if afraid to disturb the ancient slumber of the place. A single path, a narrow, crumbling causeway of stone, led from the base of the stairs across the water to a central island. Upon that island stood the ruins of a small, circular temple, its dome shattered, allowing a single, thick column of the spectral light to illuminate it from above. Ilithia's sanctum. "This is it," Thorne breathed, his voice filled with a reverence I had never heard from him before. "I never thought to see it." "It's beautiful," I whispered, captivated by the sad majesty of the drowned world. "It is a tomb," he said grimly. "And one that is not keen on visitors." He pointed toward the causeway. Lying dormant along its edges, half submerged in the water, were thorns. They were different from the ones above, thicker, almost petrified, and coated in the glowing silver moss, making them look like the bones of ancient serpents. The old guardians. "They will not let us pass easily." As if on cue, as we took our first step onto the causeway, the thorns began to stir. They rose from the water with a sound of cracking stone and hissing steam, their mossy light intensifying, their raven-dark tips aimed at us. "Stay behind me," Thorne commanded, stepping in front of me. But I held fast to his hand. "No. We do this together." I remembered the effect of our touch. "Our connection is a weapon. Let's use it." He looked down at our joined hands, then back at me, a flicker of trust in his amber eyes. He nodded. We moved forward as one, a united front against the ancient curse. The guardians struck, lashing out like whips. Thorne met the first one, blocking it with his forearm. The thorn scraped against his skin, and he grunted in pain, but the vine itself seemed to recoil, sizzling as if burned. At the same time, I reached out with my free hand, not to fight, but to touch the nearest grasping thorn. The moment my fingers brushed its mossy surface, a jolt of warmth shot from my hand into the vine. The silver light of the moss flared, and the thorn froze, its aggressive posture slackening. The whispers in my mind surged, a chorus of pure, undiluted life magic, the song of the land as it had once been. I was a conduit, my bloodline's latent connection to the stolen heart allowing me to channel a memory of healing into the curse's oldest roots. Seeing its effect, we found our rhythm. Thorne was the shield, his strength and resilience bearing the brunt of the physical assault, his body a living wall against the onslaught. I was the balm, my touch calming the enraged guardians, soothing their ancient pain, reminding them of the life they had been sworn to protect. We moved across the causeway, a slow, arduous dance of violence and grace, of shadow and light. We reached the central island, exhausted and breathless, but alive. The guardians retreated back into the water, their silver light dimming, their slumber resumed. Before us stood the sanctum. The air here was almost pure, the scent of the curse barely a whisper. The circular chamber was bare, save for a mural that covered the entirety of the far wall. It was carved into a single, massive slab of polished, raven-dark stone, the images inlaid with the same silver moss as the guardians. The mural depicted a great tree, its roots digging deep into the earth and its branches reaching for a sky filled with constellations. It told a story in pictures, the story of the land's magic. I saw how the priestesses, like Ilithia, had sung to the soil, their voices weaving the magic of life, death, and rebirth into a perfect, endless cycle. Thorne and I approached it together, our hands still linked. As if guided by some shared instinct, we raised our free hands and pressed them against the cold stone of the mural. The moment we touched it, the mural exploded with light. The silver moss flared, and the images began to move, a vision playing out not on the wall, but directly in our minds. We saw the creation of the heart, not as a theft, but as a gift from the gods, a vessel to contain and regulate the cycle. We saw that the curse was not just decay, but an interruption, a stasis. Thorne was not dying, he was trapped in an eternal autumn, never allowed the release of winter or the promise of spring. His people were not dead, but trapped as roots, unable to complete their journey back to the soil. Then the vision showed us the path forward. The cure was not sacrifice, but restoration. A ritual of balance. It required two things: the vessel of the old blood, Thorne, to act as an anchor to the land, and a catalyst of the betrayer's blood, me, to willingly offer my life force not as payment, but as a spark to reignite the cycle. And the final piece, the key to unlock the ritual, was the stolen heart itself. It had to be brought here, to this sanctum, where its stolen magic could be willingly returned to the land through the joining of our two bloodlines. The vision faded, leaving us standing in the quiet sanctum, the truth of our purpose laid bare before us. We had a plan. A real, tangible plan. A wave of triumphant relief washed over me. But as the light of the mural died, the grotto itself seemed to awaken with a new, hostile energy. The guardians we had pacified rose from the water once more, their light no longer silver, but a malevolent red. The causeway we had crossed crumbled and fell into the black water with a great splash, leaving us stranded. The dormant magic of the sanctum had been stirred, and its protectors were now fully awake, and furious. We were trapped. I looked at Thorne, my heart pounding with a fresh wave of fear, but his gaze was not on the rising thorns. It was on me, his expression intense, filled with a terrifying and beautiful gravity. "The ritual," he said, his voice a low rumble that was barely audible above the hiss of the waking guardians. "It will not just free me, Lyanna. It will bind your essence to mine, our life forces intertwined to restart the cycle of the veil." He took my other hand, holding me fast as the red light of the guardians bathed us in a threatening glow. "This will not just save my kingdom. It will make you a part of it. Forever. You will be bound to this land, to me. You will never be able to go home to Valinor. Your old life will be gone, replaced by one you never chose." He looked into my eyes, his own filled with a desperate need for me to understand the true cost. "Is that a price you are willing to pay?" Chapter 7, A Kingdom of Rose and Bone. The hissing of the awakened guardians filled the cavern, their malevolent red light painting the ruins in the colors of blood and fire. We were trapped on our island of stone, the path back to the world above swallowed by the black, churning water. Thorne's question hung in the air between us, more perilous than any physical threat. "Is that a price you are willing to pay?" He was asking me to choose not a noble death, but a life. A life bound to his darkness, to his broken kingdom, a life where the golden fields of Valinor would become nothing more than a distant memory. I looked at his face, at the torment and hope warring in his amber eyes, and I felt no hesitation. The life I had known was a beautiful lie. The man before me, for all his pain and thorns, was the truest thing I had ever known. "My home was a cage built of gilded lies, Thorne," I said, my voice clear and steady above the rising fury of the grotto. "You are a king in a prison of truth." I reached up and touched the scarred rose on his cheek. "The only home I want is one that is real. I choose you. I choose the veil." A shudder went through him, a release of centuries of tension. The desperate hope in his eyes blazed into a brilliant, beautiful fire. He leaned in and kissed me then, a fierce, possessive kiss that was not about love found, but about a future claimed against all odds. And as our lips met, the magic between us erupted. A wave of pure, golden light pulsed from our joined bodies. It washed over the grotto, and the furious red glow of the guardians was extinguished, replaced by their original, serene silver. The ancient thorns did not attack, they bowed, lowering themselves into the water, their ancient rage soothed by the harmony of our united purpose. The path had not been destroyed, I realized, it had been a final test of our resolve. Before our eyes, a new bridge of living, flowering vines grew from our island to the staircase, its blossoms releasing a soft, fragrant light. We had our answer. And we had our way out. Our journey back to Lyanna was a blur of focused purpose. Thorne, drawing on the new strength our bond provided, guided us through the mists with an unerring certainty. We arrived at the golden borders of my homeland not as a cursed king and his captive, but as equals, a storm of truth about to break upon a kingdom that had slept peacefully for too long. We did not ask for entry. We commanded it. The palace guards, who had known me as their gentle, compliant princess, fell back in shock at the sight of me walking beside the formidable, thorn-wreathed king, my face set with a resolve they had never seen. We stormed the throne room, where my father was holding court. "Lyanna," he cried, his face a mixture of shock and fear. "What is this? What have you done?" "I have brought the truth home, father," I said, my voice ringing with an authority that was all my own. I stood before his throne, Thorne a silent, powerful presence at my side. I told them everything. I spoke of Queen Alara's betrayal, of the stolen heart that beat with a parasitic magic beneath their very feet, and of the curse that had been the secret price of their prosperity. My father tried to deny it, his face pale and sweating, but the lords and ladies of his court shifted, whispering, seeing the undeniable truth in the haunted eyes of the king beside me. "The debt must be paid," I declared. "Give us the heart of the veil. Now." Broken, his reign built on a lie that had finally crumbled, my father led us down to the royal vaults. There, in the deepest chamber, it rested on a golden pedestal. The heart of the veil. It was still a thing of beauty, but its light was sickly, tainted, pulsing with a greedy, unnatural rhythm. As I approached, it seemed to cower, its stolen life force recognizing the true heirs of the land it had been ripped from. I took it without ceremony. It felt cold and wrong in my hands. We returned to the thorn veil as dawn broke, the heart pulsing weakly in a satchel at my side. We went directly to the throne room, to the dais that was both an altar and a throne. The castle was silent, waiting. Thorne turned to me, his hands gently framing my face. "There is no turning back from this, Lyanna. Once the ritual begins." "I know," I whispered, my love for him a fierce, burning star in my chest. "I am not afraid." He took his place at the center of the dais. He closed his eyes, and with a grunt of exertion, a single, thick root of weirwood descended from the heel of his boot, piercing the stone floor and burrowing into the dead soil beneath. He was the anchor. Then, he looked at me. It was time. I took the heart from the satchel. Its tainted light cast strange shadows on the walls. I stood before Thorne and held it between my hands. Following the instinct that now flowed between us, I closed my eyes and reached for him, our fingers lacing together over the stolen artifact. The moment we touched, the ritual began. I felt my life force being drawn from me, not violently, but as a willing offering. It flowed into the heart, a torrent of golden energy. The cold, sick magic within the artifact fought back, and a wave of agony tore through me. I cried out, my knees buckling. It felt like I was being ripped apart. "Thorne!" I gasped, my vision going black at the edges. "I am here," his voice was a lifeline in the storm of pain. "I have you. Do not let go, my love. Match your heartbeat to mine." I focused on the steady, powerful rhythm I could feel through his hand, the beat of the man I loved. I poured everything I was, my strength, my memories, my love, through the heart and into him. I felt him accept it, felt his own essence rise to meet mine. Our two souls, the betrayer's blood and the old blood, swirled together within the artifact, forging not a payment, but a new pact. The heart of the veil cracked in my hands. A blinding, pure white light exploded from it, not as a wave of destruction, but as a gentle, life-giving sunrise. It filled the throne room, the castle, the kingdom. The stolen magic was not just released, it was reborn, purified by our union. I collapsed, my strength utterly spent. Thorne caught me, lowering me gently to the floor as the light subsided. And then, we felt it. A great, collective sigh swept across the land. The angry red pulsing in the castle walls ceased. The mournful whispers fell silent, replaced by gasps of wonder. I looked up. The thorns that had wrapped the pillars of the throne room were receding, not withering, but transforming. The briars softened, reshaping themselves into the human forms they had once been. Men and women, clad in the ghostly remnants of ancient clothing, stood blinking, looking at their hands, their faces, as if waking from a 300-year dream. Thorne was on his knees beside me, his gaze fixed on his own arms. The thorns were melting away like snow in spring, leaving behind smooth, unblemished skin. He was healed. He was free. He touched the scar on his face. It remained, and from its center, the single rose still bloomed, no longer a mark of his curse, but a beautiful, perfect testament to the love that had saved him. He looked at me, and his eyes were no longer a pained amber, but the clear, bright hazel of the prince I had seen in the mirror. Tears streamed down his face as he pulled me into his arms. "You did it, Lyanna," he wept. "You saved us." I felt a new sensation, a warmth spreading through the stone floor, up into my body. It was the land, its cycle restarted, its soul renewed. I was no longer just Lyanna of Valinor. I could feel the roots digging deep into the soil, feel the sap rising in the trees, feel the collective joy of a people returned to life. I was a part of this place now, its queen not by title, but by the very magic that flowed in my veins. Weeks later, I stood with Thorne on that high balcony. But we were not looking out at a blighted wasteland. The thorn veil was no more. Below us lay the rose veil, a kingdom vibrant with life. The blackened soil was now rich and dark, covered in a carpet of emerald grass and wildflowers. The castle, no longer sepulchral, was a wonder of gray stone and living, flowering rose vines. And in the sky above, for the first time in 300 years, the sun was shining. My father had abdicated, unable to face the people of Valinor after the truth was revealed. They were now grappling with their history, forging a new identity based on truth instead of theft. Thorne wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. His touch was warm, solid, and real. "They are calling you the Rose Queen," he murmured into my hair. "And they are calling you the Prince of the Sun again," I replied, leaning back against him. We stood together, watching his reborn people laugh and work in the fields below. We had faced down a curse born of betrayal and hate, and had unmade it with trust and love. Our story had not been a fairy tale, but something far more real. It was a testament to the fact that even from the deepest wounds, from a history of rose and bone, the most beautiful things can grow. And as he turned me in his arms and kissed me under the warm, honest light of the sun, I knew I was finally, truly home. Lyanna and Thorne's journey reminds us that even a love born in the shadow of a curse can bring the brightest dawn. Their story shows that we are not defined by the sins of our ancestors, but by the courageous choices we make to heal the damage they left behind. It proves that true strength isn't just enduring pain, but having the courage to forge a new future from it. If you believe that truth can transform a wasteland into a garden, and that love is the oldest and most powerful magic of all, subscribe to Shadow Song Stories. Join our community and help us share more tales of broken curses, forgotten magic, and the unshakable power of two souls choosing to face the darkness together. Until the next shadow falls and the next song begins, thank you for listening.